Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending. Let me start by giving you just a general overview of how this seminar will unfold. We'll begin with part one, which is going to be a general discussion of broad topics relating to structural design efficiency. We'll then have the break. When we come back, we will move into part two, which will be some specific design examples to utilize the principles that I will discuss in part one. So with that, let's begin by talking about engagement with the contractor early. As we all know, the contractor is the person who at the end of the day must ultimately price the building and deliver that price to the owner. And so engagement with the contractor becomes very important for a number of reasons, which are itemized here on this slide. Essentially, every contractor has strengths and weaknesses. It's important to learn them and then use that info in selecting your structural system. For example, if you're working on the West Coast and it's a concrete building that you're designing, you'll find that most West Coast contractors have lots of experience with cast in place concrete and a lot less experience with precast concrete. In other parts of the country, for example, the Midwest, parts of the East, and in Florida, precast concrete is stronger. You have access to better suppliers and just more familiarity with precast systems. So that's one example of many, but suffice it to say that depending on the contractor you're working with, like with any organization or any individual, they will have areas of high expertise and areas where they're less qualified. It's important to know that as you're making early decisions in your building design. The other thing that happens when you engage with the contractor early, and of course, this is usually possible in private market projects, not near as easy to pull off in a public project, because typically with public projects, you finish the design, then it goes to bid, and you have no idea which contractor you're working with until construction starts. But for private work, at least, contractors are very often, for large projects, selected very early in the process, and it's important to build that dialogue right out of the gate. The other good thing that happens, in addition to learning a contractor's strengths and weaknesses and systems where they have high experience and other systems where they have very little experience, is you build teamwork and goodwill. And that teamwork and goodwill becomes very valuable later in the process when you hit the inevitable bumps in the road. Because as I'm sure we all know, on any project, things don't move from start to finish in a smooth, uninterrupted line. We typically have unexpected occurrences that can create some friction in the team. And if you build some goodwill early by engaging with the contractor at the start of the process, you can sometimes avoid small issues becoming much larger issues because of that lack of goodwill. The final thing on this slide, by engaging with the contractor early, you can move the value engineering process to the start of a project instead of the end, where more commonly it occurs. And the importance of that is illustrated here. The ability to impact the cost of any project, whether it be a building or otherwise, is greater during preliminary design and schematic design than it is during CDs and construction. I'm sure that most of the listeners, if not all of the listeners, can relate to this with their own personal experience, but essentially when the building is still on tracing paper, so to speak, in preliminary design and schematics, it's much easier to make changes to the layout, changes to systems, elimination of complex issues in the design. It's much easier to do that early than it is later. You get a lot of dominoes on the table very quickly, and by the time you move into construction documents and start moving toward construction, those dominoes are all lined up in a neat row, and interrupting any one of them can knock a lot of other dominoes down. So making even very insignificant changes late in the process can trigger changes to many, many sheets of work and impact a lot of other consultants who are involved in the project. So the value of engaging with the contractor early in the process allows this value engineering to begin when you're still in preliminaries and schematics, so that the effort can be much less intensive as you move through CDs.